Today, I've got a fantastic cast for you today. I'm so happy to have both Jim Highsmith and Alistair Cockburn in the same place at the same time. Believe me, that was fun. How are you, gentlemen?
I just want to make a note about in the same place means on the same like 20 square centimeters in front of someone's eyes,
Little
right?
box, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing good, except I have a little bit of a cold, so
No problems at all.
if I don't sound quite right, that's the reason.
Have at us, Tony.
All right, let's move on. As much as I might possibly be able to. If you're jumping onto this, and listening to this cast, please take note. Join the Remote AF community. Click the go to Remote AF, click the button top, and away we go. Join us there. If you'd like to sign up to our newsletter, Teamcraft, click on the button below, and away we go. All right, gentlemen.
I just have one comment. There was a bunch of breakup. When we were just chatting, there was no breakup. The moment you started talking just now, I was getting broken up sound.
I think we're getting. I think we.
Yeah, your video is flashing and your voice is breaking up.
Right.
Okay, how are we, gentlemen?
That's working now. Maybe. We'll see. That wasn't enough words.
Just one. Brilliant. How are we?
That's okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, lovely. All right. This is the fun of the electronic world. So we do seem to be getting a little bit of repeat, and I'm not sure if that's somebody's speaker in the background, but we'll work through
that. Shouldn't be a problem, but if you need, I can mute every time I'm not talking. But it was when you were talking, it would go like in and out and cut, fade,
right.
stuff.
Try that little mute. We'll problem solve. We'll problem solve agilely while we're at it. All right. How's that? Is everybody able to hear us and we're talking fine now? There we go. I think we've got that under control. So what we just did there, we were working at yeah. Okay. So I think it's when Alistair's not muted that we have problems. So if you mute yourself, Alistair, that's great.
In other words, I could just put a picture of myself up here and go out to the bar, and you'll never notice the difference. But the sound quality will be perfect.
Okay, gentlemen, let's talk about Agile as it is, and it was, and it might be. But let's start with where Agile first started. I think we'd be really interested in hearing that stuff.
Unmute your mic, Alistair.
See, it wasn't my mic is the point. There was a feedback. It was an echo, and it wasn't from me. I wonder if you have two speakers on there, Tony. I don't know. Let's get talking. Time's a wasting. Let's go.
All right. So, gentlemen, let's talk about you came together. You know, part of the emphasis to bring you together for the manifesto and etc. How did that all come about? I'd love to hear it from yourselves.
For me, it started back in the 1990s, early on. I'm not sure how far you want me to go back. I go back to the telephone switchboard days. But towards the end of the 1990s, I had done some stuff with rapid application development. And then there was this other group of people over there on the object-oriented programming side, Alistair and Martin and Kent Beck. And we were in two parallel paths and we weren't connected. And then in 1997, I met Martin at a conference in New Zealand where we were both speaking. And he introduced me to Kent Beck. Kent and I exchanged books, manuscripts before our books came out. And that sort of got the ball rolling in terms of the meeting. There was a meeting that Kent Beck called about a year before the manifesto meeting. And when I wrote it in the book, I said Alistair was there. And Alistair read the manuscript and said, "No, I wasn't there." So,
yeah, what meeting was that? What meeting was that?
That was a meeting in Rogue River, Oregon, the XP group.
Yeah, that would have been that would have been the Hillside group, and I wasn't part of the Hillside group. So Grady Booch and Kent Beck, Ward Cunningham, maybe Martin Fowler, I don't know exactly who, were playing with the patterns, and it started off, in something, and then they formed a subgroup they called the Hillside group. And I wasn't part of the Hillside group. I was, doing my own pattern thing and traveling around the world. So that I didn't know about.
Yeah. So anyway, I got involved with the XP people, and then that turned into an invite to the manifesto meeting for me.
So on my side, my life started afresh in 1991. I went from IBM research in Switzerland. I got a job with the IBM consulting group in downstate New York, IBM headquarters. And I knew nothing about methodology. And they said, just add this little bit. We have a whole methodology. We just want a little bit for the object-oriented coding part. And I said, I don't know anything about methodologies. And so my boss gave me unlimited airplane tickets to go around the world and interview teams. And she said, we don't have a competing product, so just tell us whatever works. And that I did grounded theory from 1991 till, forever. And got my PhD, dissertation out of that, and all of this stuff. But the punchline was that the people who were doing small talk or C++ projects or Objective-C in 91, 2, 3 weren't doing anything in any of the books. It literally was not describable. I mean, I would ask all do you use case tools? No. Do you use Gantt charts? No. Do you do this? No. Do you do that? No. And there was no way to describe it, but they were shipping, and all the people who were doing those other things were not shipping. So I put in 93 was my first sort of articulated methodology for the IBM. I had the incremental development, use cases, CRC code, cards, and version control in the coding, and that was it. That's all it contained. And then in 93, when the design patterns book came out, I added that. So that got me in there. And then I heard about the patterns movement in 94. So I missed that one. So I went in 95, 96, that it became part of the patterns group. There was a thing called Workshop on Object-Oriented Design that was held at Snowbird in February every year. So because I lived in Salt Lake, I fell into that. So I was connected in those groups. And I was, in fact, organizing another. So Workshop on OO Design happened in 94, 95, 96. I went to the last two. I organized it in Norway in 98. I was going to organize another one in 2001 because it had been a while. And then Bob Martin sent out an invitation to write a manifesto in February in Chicago instead of in Snowbird. And so Jim and I had a chat about that. Said, well, we're not getting on a plane and going to Chicago in February. But on the other hand, if it was like a couple of days at Snowbird, we'll make the time. So we a little bit shanghaied that.
Very nice. So gentlemen, when you got into the actual group and you were all working through it, I heard this rumor that from a very reputable source that they thought of you as the twins. I'm interested in that interesting thought.
Yeah, I was offended because Jim didn't have a beard.
Well, we both lived in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
We both worked on similar kinds of things. We had similar ideas about methodology. We worked on the initial phases of the Agile Alliance. We worked together on the initial phases of the Agile Project Leadership Network. So we did a lot of things together. The thing that really splintered our relationship was when I moved out of Salt Lake City to Flagstaff, Arizona.
That hurt me. I moved from the far end of town to his end of town so we could have lunches. And I go, I just bought a house near you. And he goes, oh, That's too bad. I'm going to Flagstaff or Florida or
He's
someplace.
never let me live that down.
No. But the thing, and I don't remember if you recall this, Jim, I was actually, to be honest, a little bit offended. They literally couldn't tell us apart because you and I were the only two talking about variable methodologies. I remember at one moment when all the stuff's on the board and they're all, well, does this apply to XP and does this apply to, and you and I were like, we want these words to apply to everything. Everything they're all going to be different. Every project's going to be something different. We want these to apply to everything. And to my mind, they literally couldn't understand that in the room, right? Steve Meller was there and he had his Meller method and Kent had XP and they're all locked. Scrum's pretty flexible, but they're all locked. And we're going like, don't lock it, right? And I think that's my guess is what they couldn't understand. And because we both lived in Salt Lake and I have no idea why. So there was like, everybody got 10 minutes to describe their methodology. Kent got 10 and the DSDM guy got 10 and everybody. And they said, you two, like, we can't tell you apart. So you get 5 minutes each. And so we had to split the time. We're busy saying like, yeah, different things for different situations, whatever. But, and they were going like, so anyway, yeah. But the big thing to me was not that, but when we kind of looked and said, these sentences that we're writing now should apply to everything we ever do, any group we ever see, even if it's all different, these sentences apply to everything. So that was, for me, a very specific moment during the meeting.
Right. Yeah, I think, you had your crystal methods with, the different colors and the different sides of the crystal. And I really talked a lot about, adaptive method software development to adapting to the situation. And I think that's a really important piece. And I think that's one of the pieces that gets missed a lot today.
I want to pick up something here that I used to say a lot, and now I say occasionally. In the end, it was very interesting because I facilitated the name search. So I have some memory about that where I maybe don't have memories about other things that happened. But we brainstormed and listed all the things on the flip chart. And then somebody said, you're like, oh, well, okay, so how do we winnow these down? And somebody had a really fascinating proposal and said, Jerry Weinberg says that what you should do is to say what you don't like about certain things instead of what you do like. It's a very bizarre protocol. And so we picked out a couple, I'd put them up there and say, what don't you like? It's not a vote against it. We're just trying to find out what you don't like about that. What's your, and so we went through that. And the key phrase that I remember that started coming up over and over again, given we had 17 men in there, somebody goes, I don't want to have to wear pink tights and a tutu to say this word, whatever words we had that was, flexible and fun and funky and whatever we had, it's like, there was going to be it had to be masculine. So we did that and let's just say we had 30, I don't know. We voted it down to 5, which I thought that wasn't my idea. Somebody had that idea. That was a great idea. Then from the 5, we had a vote. And what was strange was that adaptive and agile both came out at a tie, because I guess 17 people and I didn't vote. I have no idea, but how that came as a tie, but it came as a tie. And then we had some discussion, and in the end we selected agile, but that's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make, and it took me some months to articulate this, is you need them both. And for me, the word agile kind of talks to tracking a rapidly changing requirements terrain. That's what the word agile kind of applies to me. And adaptive implies tracking cultural changes. So if the methodology, any one instance, is agile, meaning it's tracking, changes there, but you want the organization to be adaptive in changing its methodology over time according to cultural shifts.
Right. And in fact, that's what
you want both.
Yeah. In fact, that's what I've been using them together more now, in particular with regard to leadership. So agile dash adaptive, so, sort of like an alternative to command dash control.
Right. There you go. And what else was I going to say? Agile and adaptive. Yeah, you need them. You need them both. In the words have slightly different meanings to me, and so I like the. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So I looked for an example. So an example is extreme programming is agile but not adaptive. It's got its rules, and by the XP version 1. Let's be very clear here. is agile but not adaptive, and rational unified process is adaptive but not agile. So we have examples of the things that are one and not the other. What we're looking for is the meld.
Ones that
And
are
that's
both.
what Jim's stuff was about and my stuff was about, and so on.
One thing that I think is important about the meeting, the 17 people getting together, is it's been very clear that the output of that meeting was a collaborative effort. And it was a collaborative result. And some people have said, well, who came up with that adaptive, or who came up with agile, or who came up with over? And it doesn't make any difference, because as somebody would say something, it would trigger something in somebody else. And so the creative tension in there was because of all this activity. And so somebody came up with a particular word. That's only a small part of the final result. And so there have been a lot of people that have tried to pick into that and say who did what. And we've been really consistent about saying it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I really love that. Whoever it was that came up with the this over that stuff has never stepped out, right? They just they're keeping quiet, and boy, if they're keeping quiet, I want everybody else to keep. And when I tell the story, so Tony, when I tell the story every now and then, I recount. I go, I can tell the beginning. Bob Martin stood up and said, blah blah blah. I want to write a manifesto, and we all sat in a circle. And now I'm going to tell it the way I remember it, Jim. See if any of this, comes up in your memory. So we're sitting around in a circle, and someone goes, so how do we start? And someone goes, and obviously an XP person, oh, he had a blackout. So we don't know, Jim, if all of that got captured or if that got lost. I just got a side note from Tony saying we had a blackout. So
I don't see Tony anymore.
Well, I know. I thought he went away to get a beer or a cup of coffee. Well, hang on. I'm writing him a note to see. Otherwise, we have to remember everything we said. Okay. He's about to write me a note. I'm just going to pause for a second to see what he says, because I assume he'll come back. Now, we had a power blackout. He's in Australia. You're not supposed to have power blackouts in Australia. Hang on, just tight. I don't want to say what I was going to say if we have to actually roll back. What the hell? I'll tell you. I'll say it anyway. What I was going to say is, yes, it would have been an XP person. Oh, he said it was going out up until it frizzled. Okay, Jim, we may be just talking to each other. Can't tell.
Sure.
I don't know. It says live 1812. I believe that the people are out there. He's reconnecting. Let's keep going. So it would have been an XP person said somebody, but what I say is, so Tony, did we lose everything that Jim and I said for the last 8 minutes?
I don't even know.
Melody says she could hear us.
Okay, cool. So Tony doesn't know what we said, but everybody else knows what we said. Cool. So back to what I was back to doing. So somebody goes, so how do we build an agenda? And then somebody goes, and obviously an XP person goes, just write it on a card, and pulls an index card out of their pocket. So how come we know it's an XP person? And I wrote it down and threw it on the floor. And then of course all the other XP people in the room, there were 7 of them, they all pull out index cards, right? And start writing things down and throwing them on the floor. And whoever didn't have index cards goes, excuse me, can I have a card? And then they get cards. So it's all pile of cards on the floor. And then somebody says, how do we make an agenda out of this, right? And somebody says, I don't know, anybody who wants to stay and make an agenda, stay and make an agenda. And anybody else can take a coffee break. And since I didn't care, I took a coffee break. And when I came back, the stuff was all plastered up on the wall and we were going. And then, but I remember really spectacularly, I don't know, some minutes later, 5, 10, 20, can't remember. Somebody says, hey, I want to add something to the agenda. How do I do that? And then somebody says, put it up there. And I do remember, because I can't remember who it was, a person kind of with a funny face going looking around can I do that? And they went over and they added a card to the agenda. And I have no idea what they added to the agenda. So that's how I indicate. Like nobody knows anybody who said anything, right? It's just somebody said, and then somebody said, and then somebody said, and then somebody said. Things popping all around, and that was brilliance. That's, to me, it was really the characterization of that whole meeting. Was the fact that, so who said agile? Doesn't matter. We all voted and discussed. And who came up with the 4 values? I don't know. We all decided it was a good idea and developed it and grew it. And it's super important to me that this is an outcome of 17 people,
Right.
not any, 1 or 2 or 3.
And that's the way teams should work.
Yeah. And I remember at the very end somebody going, hey, this little thing we wrote is a pretty good description of what we did here in these days, because it was individuals and interactions, and it's co-located, and all of that good stuff. So it actually described. All right, Tony, catch us up. We've been talking. We've been having a good time.
And it looks like you've been going out without me. So we're doing a great job without me, gentlemen. Just goes to show you don't need a host for this show. I do apologise to everyone. I had a little blackout here.
Yeah, we did. We had a bunch of breaks where we're going, I don't know, do we have to restart everything we just said? It's weird.
I've not had that happen to me before, but I know what to do now if it happens.
Must be present to win. Anybody who was listening, got it. You
I
can look at the recording. You can look at the recording later, Tony, and find out what happened.
Yeah. I hope you said nice things about me while I was gone. I know I know you do well. All right, let's move on. I really want to talk about Agile as it is and get a little controversial while I've got you two gentlemen here. And Alistair's just decided to swallow it down backwards.
Swallow my soup here.
So, one of the things I've been thinking about recently is, every now and then we get asked if we're going to update the manifesto. And the answer from the 17 of us have always been no. And one of the reasons for that is that when the manifesto was written, the Agile or the lightweight methodology community was the size of a marble. It was very tiny. Today, the Agile community is the size of a hot air balloon. There's a lot of hot air going around, but it's huge. And so 17 people or 50 people or 100 people are not going to be able to write a manifesto for today's Agile community. And so I'd like to put an end to all of that discussion about whether we're going to do it or not. We couldn't agree on it again, I guarantee you.
Well, and there was an explicit discussion at the very end when someone said, do we update this? This is when we decided not to update it. And whoever it was, somebody said, like I keep saying, somebody said, this is an actual interaction of 17 exact people. If it was a different city, a different temperature, you added one person, you took one person out, it would have all been different. And so we can't update it because we won't be the same people, and we shouldn't have why are we anointed, et cetera, et cetera. We just wrote this as a snapshot in time. So we had that discussion pretty clearly.
That's interesting. So, and you've always said that, and there's a particular comment to that here, which is from Juan Manuel Garrido de Paz, who basically says that that's what you've always said is that key. So, having said that, though, people have taken it upon themselves to think now that we need an Agile 2.0, or they've created it, or Agile 3.0, or we have the scaling methods, or we have all of these things that have spanned out from it. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. Well, I've been sort of talking about a couple of things. One is which is kind of back to the basics. What are the basic intention of what was in the Agile Manifesto? And so one of the offshoots of that that's going on today that I really like is Alistair's stuff on the heart of Agile, because it really does get back to the basics and what the heart is in terms of the mindset that's involved. And so what I see happening, or should happen, is that, for example, when we did the Agile project management group and we came up with a declaration of interdependence, it was an offshoot of the Agile Manifesto. You could connect the two as a lot of the same sort of intentions, but they were different words. So it was an extension. You may want to do an extension for product management. You want to do an extension for SAFe. You do an extension for something else. So I think we need to take the basics of what was good about Agile and agility, and then extend it and let people in different communities extend it in their own ways. So one of the things, I always go back to Jerry Weinberg's law of raspberry jam. The wider you spread it, the thinner it gets. And I think that's what's happened to the Agile movement. We spread it really wide, and it's got really thin in terms of out at the edge. You've got a lot of people who are just being introduced to Agile, and so we have to work on how do we thicken the layer, uh, and realize that there are going to be a whole bunch of people that don't want to do that. So we ought to concentrate on the people that do.
Thoughts, Alistair?
I have two thoughts to that. The ones are shorter and the ones are longer. I want to talk about the values, and I want to talk about how people say it's been corrupted, as the two things. The way I think about it, this is, oh, you haven't updated it, and it's kind of old and stuff. And we phrase those as values, for values. And the way I sometimes describe that is, there's 100 things that are really important on a project. You list them all. But now I challenge you, pick out 3, 4, 5 of them that you'll hang your hat on and live every project after. It's a really great team exercise for any company, any team to do. It's a really excellent exercise. So what we did was we said, out of all of the things that could be really important, we picked these 4 and we're going to hang our hats on them. And we just say, yeah, we can live there. And we did a pretty good job. Those are pretty good, solid 4 set of values. And even today, you could go live there and get, pretty good results. So in that sense, you wouldn't update that. You wouldn't change it. It's just like, maybe there's something else on somebody else's mind that would be a different value or different set of 4 short things or 5 short things that they would hang their hat on. So I want to say that about the values, and a way to think of it is just cherry picking out of all the important things, the one you really are going to totally hang your hat on. The other one, and you talked about the strawberry raspberry jam thing, Jim. I have a different way of thinking about it. And I keep trying to distill it in my mind. And I'm going to super distill it and say that people are largely driven by 3 things: greed, fear, and generosity. And I live off of that sentence right there. And I think you can explain almost everything that happens off of that, right? So what happens is, it's got nothing to do with Agile, the manifesto, the content. The moment it gave somebody more power, they grabbed it. And they converted it and bent it to their will to get more power. That's the greed aspect. And I'm known for this quote: whatever your idea is, it will be, if it's successful, it'll get misquoted and misused, right, or ignored, and you don't get to choose which. Right. So I've been part of 3 or 4 manifesto writing events, and nobody knows about the other ones because they weren't successful. And crystal clear has not been abused because nobody knows about it. As my friend, one of my friends says, "Wow, you dodged that bullet, Alistair." So how can I tell Heart of Agile is still not successful? It's because nobody's busy abusing it yet. Yeah, there you go. Nobody's busy abusing Heart of Agile or Crystal Clear. It tells you it's in the deep minority, right? So the moment it gives somebody power, boom, they're going to take it. So that's what happened, and you can't stop that. You really, so people like us have to keep going around and saying, "Come on, this is what it is," and and the people who want power, well, do something else with it. That's until the next thing comes along, and they'll drop Agile like a hot potato and jump on the next thing that'll give them power. So that's what I want to say. When people say, and I nearly wrote a blog post, except it ended up just being a tirade, and so I deleted it before I published it. 1 second here. Who's the you in that sentence? So people go, they should, you should, one should really get the executives to understand it's not this. And I go, who do you think there's a committee at the top of this? You think this is like Caesar's triumvirate? Who's the you? Who do you think's got the power to jump in and turn those dials, right? There's no you. There's just 100,000 or a million people with different greed factors and so on. Anyway, I wanted to say that because because I had a whole blog. But sometimes people go on and do it, and I just go like, who's the you in that sentence? Like, who do you think has that power to roll back the meaning of agile to something?
Right. I mean, there are a lot of people that would like to go on and use some other word, and that's fine. But it's too good a word. Both agile and adaptive are two good words, and let's not let the naysayers take over.
It's an interesting thing because you also, as you know, we were chatting before the break as well. You're talking about that leadership, that executive piece, and you know, people tell leaders what Agile's about, but you're also flipping a little bit and asking leaders to tell you what they think is Agile. So how does that work when you have that greed factor? That's the interesting thing, because then their version of it might not be what we want to understand.
Go ahead, Jim. Say it again, Tony. I blinked. Someone wrote me a message. I lost a word, and then
you lost a word. All right. Okay. So basically, before we had the break, before we came on, we were talking about executive leaders, and you were talking, you know, and how we need them to be part of the agility. But you know, we've been telling them what Agile is for some time, and so you were sort of talking about flipping it the other way around and saying, okay, well, you tell us what agility is. But my concern with that, or my question to that, concern is, if you think about the greed factor and they're trying to grab control, maybe their version of Agile's not exactly where we want it to be as well. So how do we deal with that? How do we bring them to the
you know, I think that's important, but I think that, you know, that what I thought was important is that we begin listening to top management, to executives, because there are some good executives out there who really know about transforming organizations and have done a good job of it. And let's figure out what they did and how they did it, and use those as examples, because all too often, you know, in the Agile community, the first thing was, well, we don't need any damn project managers, and no, we don't need any middle managers. And in fact, we don't even need executives. We just need to sit down here and develop our program. And I think we're way past that, because what we're looking at today is organizations that need to be able to respond to a very turbulent, disconnected environment where things are changing pretty rapidly, and they're not going to know how to respond to that, because they're not going to be resilient enough. And so I think the Agile community, Agile software community, can offer something to the rest of the business world, because we've been through it for 20 years now. And let's take some of those ideas and help the business or enterprise become more agile. Because I think that's.
I'm going to answer it in a different way, Tony.
As usual.
First of all, your question was who's the you in that sentence? Because you said, how are we going to bring them back? Okay, there's 10 of us and 40,000 of them. So the sentence doesn't have any meaning. Right? That's a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about, as though there were some upper power, you know, with lightning bolts that, you know, or something that could be brought to bear on this. So that's the first thing. It's a perfect example of the who's the you in that sentence, or who's the we in that sentence thing. The second thing is, and this relates to, and you will know this from our friend Phil, and I will leave off his last name here for all the people who don't know him. And I come up with the heart of Agile, and he says something like you gotta, Alistair, we're gonna do a train the trainers. You gotta tell me what to tell the exec to tell their people. And I said, there's no telling in the heart of Agile. I will dialogue with you about how you're going to dialogue with the exec about how they're going to dialogue with their people. It's how the heart of Agile is going to work. And he goes and he's trying this, and he comes back to me at some point in time, and he says that the exec he's working with is going like, don't give me that, don't give me that Socratic stuff. You're the smart guy. I'm paying you money. Tell me what to do. He goes, well, Alistair, what am I supposed to do now? And I said, that's not your client. So that's my answer to you, Tony. When you say, how do we bring them? Those who can't hear, right? There are execs who bring in a consultant. They say, tell me what to do. Tell me what to tell people. Now, I went, of all the strange places, I went to France, Orange, the telecom company, And I was blown away. The guy was Dutch, as it turns out, but he was still in a French telecom company. And he says, what I like about talking to you is you don't try to tell me what to do. All these consultants come in here as though they know my job and they try to tell me what to do. Don't do that. I know my job, right? He says, but you dialogue with me. You dialogue
Right.
with me, right? And we go see patterns together, right? So you see, when you say how are we going to get them back, there's people who can hear and there's people who can't hear. And what I say to certain people, like I go to Chile. Chile is a pretty, militaristic, hierarchical country. And they say, how can we do this agile? Like, how are we going to do anything in this country? And I go, all you can do is find other people like you, right? And you get together and you connect bigger puddles of people who are happy to like share and grow and like support each other. That's literally all we get to do. That's all you get to do. Anyway, so that's my answer.
I asked for that, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
I think after all this stuff, I should know better. So picking up on words, because words are important, language is important, as Alistair has always taught me, is thinking about you using the word agile and adaptive are very good words. And I think, interestingly enough, adaptive seems to have come to the forefront now. And there are a lot of people saying agile is a tainted word. And I know I'm being controversial, but this is the I asked the question of, what's your thoughts on that?
Since forever, I have always been very happy to encounter people who ask for the things we ask for without using any code words. They'll just ask for more testing and they'll just ask for more interaction with the customer. They'll just ask to get information, right? They do it every principle or practice inside the agile, playbook is separately defensible. And I really love it. There are people who are attracted by it's got a moniker, I'll do this, right? And I'll do all of that. There are others who are allergic to that moniker. And I love it when I encounter people who just introduce this stuff like one idea at a time, each one separately defensible, right? And they just get Jim and I have this in common. You just get the organization moving a little bit. That's really the goal. Get it moving. And once it gets moving, then, get moving some more.
Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. Where you run into differences about that is sometimes when you are trying to move big organizations, but you still have, what I find is you've got to find the people that Alistair's talking about at every level. You can't just have agile people at the bottom in the teams. If you really want to do a good enterprise transition, you've got to have enough people at every level that you can work with like that. And that's one of the things about cutting out a lot of levels. You have fewer people to coordinate.
Yeah, I like that.
And so one of the things that I talk about is between levels of the organization, you have to align them. You've got to be accountable, and you've got to have autonomy. And you can't get away without having those three things. So you've got to have alignment around goals. You've got to have alignment around how you're going to measure success. You've got to have alignment around, architecture or whatever it is. And then you've got to have autonomy. Everybody's looking for autonomy, but the other side of that is accountability. And so I think sometimes we ask for too much autonomy without enough accountability. And so I think at every level of the organization, you've got those things that you've got to iron out: alignment, autonomy, and accountability.
So my other question around that is when you think of it, and you're talking about the layers and the organizational construct, and the one that always comes up is project management or project management offices. And again, this always gets me into trouble, but what's your thought on that? I mean, project management office in its right, when it, in most organizations, becomes a controller of how the work, what the work, and where the work goes, which is sort of the antithesis of what we're trying to create. What's your thoughts around project management offices, etc.?
Well, I think you still need project management, but you need a different style of project management. Luckily enough, I called it Agile project management. And on the
I think
I think
you ought to replace PMO with some sort of a governance model. Now, if only anybody would like study governance and then maybe give us a book on it, that'd be just a real treat.
But I think traditional PMOs have done more to block agile implementations than any other part of the organization. They're just set up to be control organizations. Now, there are some people like Sanjeev Augustin who's begun talking about value management offices that are more consulting organizations. And in fact, that's what I thought a real PMO ought to be. You either get to do one of two things. You either get to be the project police or you get to be the project consultants. You don't get to do both. And all too often, it's the control aspect. The problem with the control aspect is the teams then are not accountable, right? Because they can say, we didn't get the people when we needed to, or we didn't get that dependency done, or there's always an excuse because they have these other organizations that impose on them. So, and if you got to throw all those out in order to get accountability at the team level.
I'll just jump in there and say Alistair was poking me then. So just for anybody who's wondering why he made that straight comment, is that because myself and Phil Budzinski, who is on the call, I can see him commenting, are writing a book around agile governance or governing the system of agility. Don't put governance in your agile, put agile in your governance. That's enough. It's not an ad for me. Alistair, what was your thoughts on the project management office?
I want to advertise your forthcoming book because I'm going to write some nice words because Tony and Phil are dyed-in-the-wool agile people amongst the very few people who anything sensible to say about governance. So although I have many allergies around the word governance, these guys are going to, thread the needle if anybody will. So get that book out.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting an advert. So.
Hey, I've got about time for like one more question, and then I have to buzz out.
Yeah. So we've had a roller coaster with me jumping in and out. But the one question I had left in the midst of all of this is we've talked about where it was, where it is. Where's it headed? Where's that next big moment for agility? You've seen it from the early days through to where it is now, and it's interesting to hear your predictive thoughts, I suppose.
Well, one of the things at Sanjeev's conference in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation on history tackles artificial intelligence. Because one of the things that I did when I was writing my book, as I said, when I started on the last chapter, I said I was going to predict some stuff. And I thought, no, that's silly. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. So the reason for history is to prepare you for the future, not to predict the future. And so that's how I kind of attacked that. And I said, if you look at the transitions of technology, and I started with telephone switchboards, with operators plugging stuff into the switchboard, and I said, when the technology came in and eliminated those jobs, 400,000 women lost their jobs. And so every transition and technology transition, somebody's going to win, and so excuse me, and somebody's going to lose. And the way you don't lose is to learn, continuous learning.
Yeah, so I have a useless view I can offer you, and my useless view is that I can't predict the future. You can look at my stock portfolio and get hint number one, and you can look at the fact that I thought it was a bad idea to write a manifesto as the other indicator of not to listen to me about anything about the future. So my job is to go around the world and tell people here that the people over there are doing that, right? So I'm like a bard, right? In the olden days, I am actually a bard, because in the olden days, what the bard would do was go around and tell the stories of the olden days, which I do, talking about the 90s, and then tell the people what the dress habits are over here and what's popular, over there. And that's what I do, is I tell the people in Australia what the people in France are doing, and vice versa. So I heard someone call a presentologist, not a futurologist, right? I just like barely could keep up with the present. So no, I would say that Jim and I are the wrong people to predict anything, because we like our stuff. You have to ask somebody who doesn't like our stuff, because they're the people who are going to come up with the anti something, right? Because we're going to be going, yeah, we like it, cool, right? Innovator's dilemma works for me, right? And so now, somebody mentioned to me just recently that both agile and objects have lost meaning, because there's no dominant programming paradigm, not objects, not functional, not anything. And agile's gotten so diluted to mean whatever anybody wants to say or not say, that going and saying this is what agile means. Well, we're starting over, but with like 1 million, 2 million people we're trying to impact. It's, as that in the raspberry jam thing, it's just gotten so dang thin right now that so I don't particularly see agile coming to the fore particularly, right? I don't see it having the power and the punch, not a meme. So we're in kind of a transition state or an empty space right now, as I see it. What comes next? No idea.
Brilliant. Well, it's been a roller coaster. I've learned a few things today. So if you learn something every day, that's good. I've learned that this cast can go on without me, as long as I got a couple of people in here to talk to themselves. Brilliant. And it's been fantastic having the both of you on. And I'll go back and see all the stuff I missed and see what you said about me. For those watching, don't forget to join our community, remoteaf.co. Click the community button. Lots of people talk about the things we're talking about today and many other things. Don't forget to sign up our newsletter, Team Craft, which is in the show notes. And fantastically, thank you, Alistair Cockburn and Jim Highsmith, for spending time with us and coming together today. I do believe this is one of the only casts that's got you both together at the same time. So I'll take a tick on that.
Well, it's been fun. It's great to catch up with you, Alistair.
Yeah, and I just barely saw opened up the window with all of the chats, and people were busy saying, yeah, we can still hear you. We can still hear you. So evidently the recording has been going, and I'm going to buzz off to the next thing that happens in my evening, and you can finish your cup of coffee, Tony, and whatever's in your day.
Brilliant.
It was fun talking with you guys. See you later.
Fantastic.
Take it easy.